The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous supporters. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/donate. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode number 80.
On the Doctor. I've lived for over 2,000 years. I am Scottish. I can complain about things. Shush.
Hi, I'm Don Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. Today we're discussing the first Doctor, William Hartnell, story, The Aztecs. Joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Hey, Dom.
So just a quick, before we get started, I just want to kind of talk to the folks about keeping an eye out on sqpn.com for some new shows we've got coming. We've got StarQuest Headlines, which is we've been doing for a couple months now. It's daily 2 minutes headlines of the sorts of things that are of interest to people who listen to SQPN. Science fiction, hard science stories, stuff from the Pope that is interesting. You get 3 or 4 headlines every day. Check it out. Also, a couple other shows we got coming. If they're not already up yet, they'll be there soon. The Pilgrim Life with Deborah Shaban and Sandy Garezar, which is about being a pilgrim. So like taking actual pilgrimages to places like the Camino de Santiago in Spain, or going to the shrines in Mexico. Not those ones. Although if you want to take a pilgrimage to Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts, I suppose that could work. But also just about having a pilgrim attitude about life and that sort of thing. So, The Catholic Traveler with Mountain Butorac, which is another sort of travel-related show. Mountain that's his real name, Mountain Butorac. He's an American living in Rome with his family, who works as a pilgrimage guide, travel guide to folks. If you ever go to Rome, he's the guy you'd hire, and he'd take you to see the best sites. You say, I want to see like these 5 saints, or I want to see the best places for apostles. And he'll design an itinerary, 1 day, a week, whatever. He also leads pilgrimage groups to the Holy Land, to Ireland. So we're going to have him on. He has amazing adventures and a lot of fun. So those are coming up. Keep an eye out for those. We'll talk about it more as they come online. If you want to find out about these things as they're happening, 2 things: go to sqpn.com, sign up for our newsletter. We don't send out more than maybe 1 a month, if that. If I can remember to send one out. So you may get like 1 email a month from us. And go to our Facebook page, go to our Twitter, follow us on those, like us on those, SQPN on both of those, and you'll stay up to date on those. So, that said, let's get to what we're here to talk about. Doctor Who, The Aztecs. This is a historical, what they called in the old days, which is, there's nothing supernatural. No space aliens, no science fiction. This is about traveling to a different time and interacting with those people.
Just a bunch of white English men and women acting like Aztecs.
Exactly.
Yeah. This was part of the original design of the show, which was part of its educational remit for children. We were going to have science-oriented shows, which would feature Ian as the science teacher, and history-oriented shows that would feature Barbara as the history teacher. And so Barbara's totally in her element in this. She knows all about the Aztecs. In some of the spinoff media, they established that she did her master's thesis on Aztec civilization to explain why she knows so much about this. This story was written by John Lucarotti, who is responsible for a number of other Doctor Who stories, almost all in the first Doctor's time and all historicals in that time. He also wrote Marco Polo, which was a really cool story that unfortunately doesn't exist in video anymore, only on audio. And he wrote the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve. He wrote the Aztecs. So he did 3 historicals for the first Doctor, and then he did the original draft of a 4th Doctor story, The Ark in Space, which is the one with the Weirin, the kind of wasp monster. Except he didn't do the revised draft because he was apparently on vacation or traveling or something, and someone else had to do the rewrite.
Interesting. Yeah, Robert Holmes, I think, was credited with that story. So it's interesting. Basically the basic premise. So this is 1964 was when this aired, that first season, and this is the 6th story of that season. So they're deep into that season at this point. But it's the couple of firsts for this episode. It's the first story, Doctor story, that deals with the issue of changing history, changing the course of history. It's a major plot point in this one. But also the first to involve a romantic subplot for the Doctor.
How about
the first
that?
Doctor is my boyfriend story.
and so a couple of comments about that. One of the interesting things, now, the Doctor didn't have, except for this episode, he really didn't have a real, or I'm going to say episode when I mean story, just, sorry. The Doctor is treated as a romantic figure in this story, and we know he has a sexual nature because Susan is his granddaughter. Mm-hmm. But as the classic Who era progressed, the show's creators became uncomfortable with this, and they wanted to make it clear to the audience everything is purely platonic with the Doctor and his companions, and they so de-emphasized the Doctor as a sexual being that there were even speculations that Susan may not be his granddaughter, but just someone he was traveling with, which that kills one problem to create another. It's even creepier if she's not his granddaughter.
Right.
But none of that had set in yet. So, in this time frame in the show's history, the Doctor was presented as someone who was a sexual being because he had a granddaughter. And it's not unreasonable to then say, well, could he have a September romance? Which he then does in this episode. He's totally in to Kamika. They make that really clear. We get facial close-ups and everything.
Although his expression when he realizes that making cocoa for her was actually like a
marriage proposal.
that was priceless. That was very well acted.
I've made some good cocoa before, but not wedding proposal, marriage proposal cocoa.
Exactly.
Yeah. but from the way he acts, just from his facial expressions and the camera angles and stuff, it's clear he totally digs Kamika. And he's even talking to her about how happy he is and all this stuff, and she says, "You've declared your love for me," and he agrees.
Right.
Yes,
he just didn't realize that he had proposed marriage in declaring his love for her, and so there's this comedic aspect to his relationship with her as well. And this is my personal headcanon here, but given the fact that there's this real romance that's also played for comedy, making the Doctor uncomfortable, by this woman who's middle-aged and who looks kind of like River Song, and that given River Song is a time traveler, in my headcanon, Kamika is River Song playing with the first Doctor.
Oh, that would be too funny.
If I ever write for Big Finish or something, that's becoming canon.
Oh, that's funny. Now, here's kind of an interesting irony of that. Of course, William Hartnell, at the time that this was being recorded and aired, he was 55 years old.
That just amazes me.
He seems so much older.
The actress,
he's 5 years older than me.
The actress who played Kamika wasn't even 30. She was 28.
Was she really? Wow.
She was born in 1935, and of course, this was 64.
Wow.
When this aired.
Yeah. Which explains she's supposed to be in her 50s, but to my eyes, she looks like she's maybe early 40s.
Yeah, I mean, they whiten her hair a little bit. Yeah. They give her a little gray.
It's just kind of funny that there was that big of a difference, yet they were supposed to be playing characters that at least looked similar age.
I just love the idea of the Doctor trolling through a retirement community with a cup of cocoa. Like, I mean, that's essentially what he's doing. So let's talk about what's going on here. So the TARDIS arrives in a 15th century Mexican temple from Marinus. We just left the keys of Marinus, and like it literally follows on from the TARDIS dematerializing there and materializing inside a tomb of this Aztec priest. Barbara and Susan kind of leave the TARDIS before the Doctor and Ian do, and Barbara immediately is like, "Oh, this is Aztec," because as we established, she's an expert of some sort in Aztec stuff. She starts picking up things and playing with them, which is a bad idea from an archaeological standpoint, but whatever. And she puts on this bracelet, steps out. Then Susan discovers this ingenious secret door. This huge slab of rock, really made of styrofoam, but come on, let's go with it.
Of course.
This huge slab of rock that rotates on a horizontal axis at the push of a 15-year-old girl. And
we all want that in our house.
From one side.
We all want that in our house. We want like the secret room that you know the way to get in, no one else can.
Oh yeah, my wife and I have this agreement that if we hit the lottery, there's this company that I always see their videos on Facebook. I'm totally calling them to design the secret passages in our house. That's a thing. Anyway, so. They walk out from this room, and there are these Aztec priests there, and sees the bracelet on Barbara and thinks that she's the reincarnation of this deceased Aztec priest in the tomb,
who is also a god.
Who's right? I guess they have deification of ancestors, and so then we have this very interesting, complex plot. Which is, the high priest of knowledge, Otlok, who calls Barbara Yetaxa and believes in her as a god. And then you have the high priest of sacrifice,
Tlotoxl. Which for some reason the actors can't pronounce consistently.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I heard them saying at various times Totoxl or Lotoxl. They had trouble saying Tlotoxl.
I think I take Lotoxl every day with 50 milligrams.
By the way, of course, what's funny about that, because there's the whole scene with Ian where he couldn't pronounce it, and they all jump on him about it. Otlok's name.
Incidentally, as a linguist, here's a trick that you can use to figure out how to pronounce words like this. The English, the reason Tlotoxl is hard for us to pronounce is we don't in English have an initial TL sound. We never encounter TL on the front of words, and so we're not used to saying it at the start of a word. The way you can teach yourself to pronounce things like that is put it in the middle of a word. So if you can say hot, and you can say lock, and you can say hot lock, then say hot lock without the HO, and it becomes pla.
Well, we could say outlock, because it's two syllables.
Outlock would work too. Yeah. And then just say it without the ow, and it becomes plok. So this guy's name is Tlotoxl.
Right. Okay. So what happens is this power struggle between the priest of sacrifice and the priest of knowledge, with Barbara in the center.
And apparently it is not against Barbara's programming to impersonate a deity.
Right. Yeah. And
I'm just going to lance the boil on this one. So Barbara is super concerned about the existence of human sacrifice in their civilization. She is also sympathetic to their civilization. She says when the Spaniards came, they only saw the Aztecs' human sacrifice. They didn't see all of the good in their civilization. And so Barbara wants to rewrite history so that the Aztecs drop human sacrifice before the Spaniards get there, so they'll see the good and they won't be destroyed. And she's very concerned about the evil of human sacrifice. But what she's blind to is the evil of impersonating a deity and having people worshiping her.
Right. That's the using evil means to a good end.
Yeah.
And that's a classic. Yeah. So one of the things that I was wondering, because I am not an expert in Aztec lore, how accurate any of this is to actual Aztec history.
It's really surprisingly accurate. John Lucarati did a lot of research. And so when they're talking about things like the 13 heavens and the 5 suns, and that's all real. And also real, and I was surprised by this, but I did some checking on it. Apparently a lot, because in this episode, the sacrifice victims are depicted as willing. They're kind of like Ood in a certain way.
Right.
And in a lot of Mesoamerican cultures, and in a lot of other cultures that performed human sacrifice, the sacrifices were not willing. They were like captives in battle.
Right.
But apparently we do have documentation of willing victims in Aztec sacrifice. Not necessarily all victims were willing.
No,
but
there were very much that same mindset of those who were captured in battle would be sacrificed as well. And especially as the sacrifices got more and more and more prevalent with the Spaniards conquering, they ran out of willing victims and decided to go with other not so willing victims.
Right. Okay. And then the other aspects I'm going to guess then were on target of the two different priests, the priest of knowledge, the priest of sacrifice, and that sort of stuff.
That I don't know.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious. What we do have here is something we've talked about before, which is the key trope is the Doctor and his companions are separated from the TARDIS again. Like we just had that in the Keys of Marinus, and then they walk away from the TARDIS again, and the door closes behind them. They can't get to it.
And in the Impossible Planet, in our podcast order, we had the same exact thing.
Right.
We have Houston. We have achieved TARDIS separation.
You would think by the time, of the 10th Doctor, the Doctor would have TARDIS separation anxiety.
Yes.
It's traumatic.
Yeah. So Barbara, she sort of takes to this regal role right off the bat. I mean, they put her in these robes and the headdress, and she's like already like when the Doctor and Ian show up, she's already like, I am the goddess Yetaxa, and is in control there. So it's very interesting how quickly she adapts to this. Meanwhile, Ian gets roped into competing to be the champion and will have to participate in that human sacrifice. Poor Ian.
Ian with martial arts, who knew?
Now the thing I'm thinking is that Ian at this time, early 1960s, is maybe old enough to have been in World War II.
Maybe, but he certainly is of an age to have been, in the military forces for some time before becoming a school teacher.
Right.
So it's not implausible.
Right. I mean, the idea that, you could show up and, the greatest warrior of the Aztec civilization, you defeat with a little, jujitsu or whatever. Yeah. With your thumb.
I love the early Vulcan nerve pinch.
Yeah. Well, my brother did that on me a few times. I know how painful it is, so I'm sympathetic with
hit that one nerve. Yeah,
Yetaxa there. You hit that nerve in the shoulder. Ian and the Doctor have sort of free run. Susan has a few errors in protocol, and so she's sent off to what they call the seminary to be trained.
Yeah, and we should explain for Americans, I don't know how it is in England, but for Americans, the word seminary refers to a school where priests are trained, and they're not training Susan to be a priest. In older English and in older British English, a seminary was just a school. And so if you, like, are a Gilbert and Sullivan fan like I am, and you watch The Mikado, the three little maids in that operetta are like three little maids who have just come from a seminary, meaning they're on their school break. And so
now would it have been more like a boarding school than just your traditional neighborhood school?
Yeah. And so by having Susan go to this seminary, she's just going to be schooled in proper Aztec culture.
One of the things that happens is, at the end of the first of these 4 episodes in this story is this whole thing where Barbara wants to change history and change the Aztecs to use her power, the misunderstanding of her as a god, to stop human sacrifice. And so what we have in the plot is that they want to the priests want to sacrifice, have a human sacrifice, a willing sacrifice, to make it rain. Although Outlook is already, as the priest of high knowledge, is already kind of showing some understanding that the sacrifices don't actually cause the rain.
They're just being timed to coincide with the beginning of the rains.
Right. And go ahead.
One thing I want to point out too is this. I think this is the first time where the doctor, he says you can't change time, and he says, "Believe me, I know. I've tried."
Right. Right.
He also says, and I wrote this line down exactly. He's talking to Barbara. He says, "But you can't rewrite history, not one line." And years later, Stephen Moffat takes that line and puts it in the mouth of River Song and bends it slightly to "Don't you dare rewrite history, not one line," talking about her history with the Doctor.
Interesting. That also plays into Kameka being River Song. She was there. She was there.
Maybe she heard it. Yeah.
So what happens is that she demands this. Barbara commands that the human sacrifice stop, and the Tlotoxl and Ishtaka are outraged, as is the victim, who throws himself from the top of the pyramid anyway.
Yeah. So right there, on-screen suicide on a children's show.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's amazing. And then Barbara is totally stoic about it afterwards.
Right. There's not a whole lot of emotion. It was a little underplayed, maybe. But
I mean, she did kind of show, a little bit of surprise. But yeah, it wasn't like this, absolute, gasp and cover her face or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's very out of keeping with the kind of way women could be portrayed on television at the time as kind of hysterical. Yeah. And she is not at all. She doesn't, she may be surprised and show a little bit of disgust with it, but she soldiers on in her, I am a god and I'm going to fix this situation role. Yep.
And makes herself the target now of if we can't sacrifice that guy, we're going to sacrifice you, and really solidifies her enemy in Tlotoxl. There's an interesting moral quandary that comes up because of Ian's been placed in this role of champion for Barbara or Yetaxa. He has to accompany the human sacrifice to the altar of sacrifice. And the Doctor tells him not to interfere. And there's a moral quandary in that. If you happen to travel with the Doctor and are placed in this situation as a Christian, what do we do? I'll put it to you, Father Cory, since you are our priest here, the priest of knowledge and of sacrifice.
Just not human sacrifice.
Right. Just sacrificing God.
And that is a very good question. I mean, it's my instinct would be to say is that I could not participate. I could not just stand there and be the guard who does it, even if that puts my life at risk. Because that's the same question people have of if you were a guard let's use a modern day context. You're a guard in a prison and your job is to march this prisoner, whether he's innocent or guilty, for death penalty. Well, if you're opposed to death penalty, could you do that job? I think some would argue if that is something that you consider wrong, you couldn't do that job. You would have to find another job within the prison, if not another place as a guard in general.
Although there might be a case you could make where accompanying someone that is going to go anyway, accompanying them is you can provide some sort of comfort.
But you're the one that has to hold him down as he's being strapped into the chair.
Right.
That would be the direct parallel.
Yeah, that would be.
Ian had to hold his legs as the guy is being stabbed.
That's true. Jimmy, do you have any insight into this?
I think it depends on the situation that one finds oneself in. If someone breaks into your house and is about to kill somebody and you have no power to stop them, and trying will only result in your death as well, then it can be morally legitimate to not interfere. So, like, if let's say I and my wife are in a house together, and someone breaks in and starts to kill me, and for my wife to interfere would only get her killed too, it would be legitimate for her to hang back and try to escape or do something else, but not interfere in me being killed.
Right.
On the other hand, if there is something she could do to help save my life, then she would be responsible to make the effort, assuming the risks to her were proportional. And so you translate that principle into other situations. If you're being told simply don't interfere with a human sacrifice because we have no chance of changing it and it's only going to get us killed too, that would be legitimate. If you're being told to participate in some way, it gets more complicated, and you have to invoke what are called the principles of cooperation with evil. Because we live in a fallen world, we always cooperate in one degree or another with people who are going to do something wrong. You can't buy a pizza without running the risk the pizza guy is going to use some of his wages to buy porn. It's impossible to disentangle yourself from other people who are going to make bad moral choices at some point. And so Catholic moral theologians have developed these principles. They're called principles of cooperation with evil. A key principle is you yourself cannot approve of the evil. And obviously, these characters are not approving of human sacrifice. Another principle is you yourself can't do something that's intrinsically evil. So, like, I can't kill an innocent person even if someone's trying to force me to. I could not hold the knife, for example. But if you're doing something that's not itself intrinsically evil, it gets dicier. Like, could I help walk a person to the place of their execution? Well, okay, it's not intrinsically evil to walk someone somewhere, but it's getting really dicey here. And here's where theologians would have potentially a difference of opinion. If you're just one guard among many walking someone somewhere, and you would instantly be replaced by somebody else if you stepped out, then some theologians could look at that and say, well, maybe if your own life is on the line, you could be justified in playing that minimal role, since what you're doing is not intrinsically evil. Others would look at it and say, nope, you're still too close, morally speaking, to the commission of an evil act. You can't do that.
And interesting, in this case, what's happening is we have a willing victim, and Ian is holding his legs. So he's not dragging someone unwilling. He's sort of accompanying, and he's just holding the legs of someone who has offered himself. So I wonder.
To me, this is too close. Holding the legs is too close, because that presupposes you're thwarting. If he does change his mind, you're thwarting his ability to get off the altar. But
if he's just accompanying someone who's walking willingly, maybe that's remote enough.
It's remote enough that some theologians would say if you're in danger yourself, you could do it in that situation.
And we should probably stipulate here that even with a willing victim, the practice of human sacrifice is still evil.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
Although it's interesting, the doctor does say that you must respect the Aztec religion and culture, even if it includes human sacrifice.
And that's one of the interesting things about this episode is we have this clear recognition that human sacrifice is evil, but they really are making an effort to acknowledge that there are other aspects to Aztec culture that can be appreciated and respected, even though they have this really huge problem right here.
Right, exactly. So an interesting moment where the doctor talks about that he's trying to get the plans to the temple to figure out how to get back into this room. He just assumes that there must be a way into the room that holds the TARDIS, that there must be a secret entrance.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, it's reasonable. There's some way to get back in.
Yes. But he describes himself as a scientist, an engineer, a builder of things. I thought that was an interesting way for the doctor to kind of outline who he is in these early stages.
It's sort of progressive, too, because if you're talking to someone from a pre-scientific civilization, saying I'm a scientist isn't going to cut it. And then it's okay, maybe we can make it more concrete. I'm an engineer. Okay, they're not going to have that word either. I'm a builder of things.
Yeah, right. The doctor accidentally betrays Ian with Ishta. Ishta is the son of the guy who built the temple. The doctor doesn't realize Ishta is the champion that Ian is going to have to fight. And so he gives Ishta this thorn that will paralyze his opponent, not realizing it's Ian. I kind of liked how this story is multi-layered. It's a complex story that you have to kind of keep track of several things at once. And I like that.
And Ixta has told the doctor that this is not a fight to the death. So he's whoever he's giving the thorn to is not going to be killed.
Right. That's an important point.
And then, it was a natural tranquilizer.
Yeah.
The doctor had coated the thorn with a tranquilizer.
And then we have this combat between Ian and Ixta, which I was waiting for someone to yell "Kroika!" And so it's almost like a Vulcan combat in Amok Time, which is contemporaneous. The style of on-screen fighting is very similar in that way. There's a lot of very obvious, like, wide misses, and
they did it better on Star Trek, though.
They did, but there's a couple of times where it's like, I'm supposed to grab you and throw you, and I missed the grab, so my opponent's gonna hang the arm out there waiting for me to get the grab, like a couple of moments like that. But they had the weapons that's how an Aztec, I do know that an Aztec axe would have been wood with obsidian, obsidian flakes in it. For the sharpness. Is it, like we talked before, is it believable that Ian could defeat the leader of the Aztec army? Maybe not.
But it's on the bubble.
Yeah. So the doctor, as we progress to this, he offers to take Barbara away and leave the Aztecs with their human sacrifice if the priest gives him the secret to open the tomb. He's trying to make a deal. It's like, look, we'll go, we'll leave, we'll take Yetaxa with us, we'll leave you with intact the way you were, just get us in the tomb. It doesn't work, unfortunately.
Well, the story would be over at that point if it did.
Right. We also get this scene where the doctor accidentally gets engaged to Kamika. There was this great moment when the doctor says to Ian that he's engaged, and Ian goes, "You're what?" He has this great reaction. It was so funny.
That smart aleck grin that Ian had after that was priceless.
Oh yeah, he just put to needle him a bit with it.
Yep.
Yeah, what's interesting is once the doctor realizes he's engaged, he doesn't immediately try to get out of it.
Right.
He's not like saying, "Oh, my dear, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I'm from another culture and I didn't know that Coco has this significance here." He's like willing to let this ride and play out and kind of see where it goes.
I mean, Kamika is a catch, I guess. The doctors.
Yeah, I would think so.
So Ian and the doctor discover that there's this tunnel that starts in the garden where he's been meeting with Kamika, the Garden of Peace. And actually, I want to say with the Garden of Peace, like I kind of joked it's the retirement community, but in this Aztec civilization, it's this the people over a certain age,
over 50 or something, get to stay there and not participate in the battles and go out fighting and stuff.
And then people come and consult them for their wisdom. I kind of like that. That is something admirable to the Aztecs. I wish we did that more, where we consulted our elders for their wisdom, and treasured them a little more. So they've discovered in this garden that there's a tunnel that Ian crawls into. He's going to climb in. It's supposed to lead to the tomb, but Ixta shows up, and he knows that Ian crawled in, and he tricks the doctor. He puts the stone back in place. It seals Ian in, and then it starts to fill with water, and that's how this episode ends. For reasons, that's right.
And part of the irrigation system of the city or something like that.
Right. Yeah, he actually tells the doctor that unless the stone's put back, the garden will be flooded. Well, it turns out that it actually is a tunnel, and we get this sequence of events. It's kind of this fun little sequence of Ian climbing through various places with this montage of Ian. He finally gets into the TARDIS,
and he's in this Aztec costume at this point, kind of like when he was in Marco Polo. He had the kind of Chinese costume,
right?
But he's in this Aztec costume, and we get these shots of his legs, and as he's climbing up this ladder, and it's like, is he wearing Morris dancers' bells? I mean,
that's great.
I mean, he's definitely got bells strapped onto his legs, although they are Aztec, not Morris.
Right. And so he gets back into the tomb, and so he knows, like, I can't just like walk back out again because we'll be in the same position we were just in. So he finds some leather straps or some sort, attaches them to the top of the door where it swings.
There's like a counterweight or something there that he could hook onto.
Yeah, it's really it was really kind of a counterweight above the rotation axis of the door, and then kind of feeds it underneath. The problem is in order to get enough pressure on it to pull it down, like, so I'm trying to explain this in words, this visual. So you're on the outside of the door and you're trying to pull the top of the inside of the door down so that it rotates. I don't know why he didn't just shove something in there to keep the door open.
Well, that would be too easy.
Yeah. But to pull it down requires more force than Ian, the Doctor, Barbara, and Susan can put on it, and it ended up actually, I think, breaking the strap.
Yeah,
at one point.
strap breaks,
and
so the Doctor says we need a pulley. But the Aztecs don't have the wheel, which is a nice, history point for the kids.
Yeah.
And so the Doctor proceeds to make a wheel so that he can use it as a pulley.
Yeah, he invents the block and tackle. I did notice at the end of this episode, he took it with him. He didn't leave it for them to discover.
Yes. They took it into the tomb.
Yeah, because imagine if the Aztecs had the block and tackle before the Spanish came, how history would be different today.
I like the line where he's in the Garden of Peace making it, and he's got the wheel, and Kamika's like, I don't know what this is, but I sense it's going to take you from me.
Yeah. Yes, that was actually a very clever line. Yeah. This technology that she sees. Once again, 2 stories in a row, Ian is framed for murder.
Yeah.
Like, Ian has got to stop putting himself in a position to be framed for murder. He is... framed by the fact that his axe is used to take down Otlok, who is Barbara's Yatox's ally in all of this.
Except it wasn't really murder; it was just knocking him out.
Right. Yeah. Attempted murder. But it's like, well, who else could it be? It's your axe, right? What? No one else can take an axe and bonk someone. But it's they're primitive, so therefore they're gullible. Is that idea? I think. And then
I don't know that I'd view it that way. I think it's because they are trying to respect Aztec culture. I would just say they don't scrutinize or cross-examine the evidence too closely because the plot would fall apart at that point. So they need the plot to keep moving.
Don't you mean
direction.
They're not enlightened, 20th century Brits with their proper, rules of evidence and everything?
Right.
Is that really what happened here? I'm kidding.
No, I mean the writers are not top drawer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot happens,
I just say that in terms of, John Lucarotti did some really nice stuff. I really like this story, but on this particular point, there's just some hand waving going on.
Oh yeah,
I think. Well, I was going to say, so much happens in this final episode of the story that there wasn't really time to develop anything else. There's a very complex. The plot gets really arcade or not arcade, but really complicated, intricate in this part of the whole story.
And this is only a 4-parter.
Yeah,
it feels really fast paced as a result.
Yeah, comparatively, it does
compared to other things this era.
Yeah, so Otlok, now that it looks like Barbara sent Ian to take him out for what? Again, there's a little hand waving there. Like, what would be her reasoning? He's her sole ally.
And Barbara points that out to Otlok. What possible reason would I have to harm you? And that's what makes Otlok start to rethink matters and say, maybe maybe I have been deceived here.
Right. And Atlok, a very interesting development of the plot, decides, you know what, I don't know what's going on. My faith has now been unsettled. I'm going to give up my position as high priest and go off into the wilderness to figure out what's going on in my life.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting development.
Yeah. So he loses his faith. And that's really interesting, to see that played out. And again, on a children's show. And
he hands over his badge of office, which that gives title and possession to all of his possessions, to Kamika to use to help. To Ian, he thinks
help
is
Ian.
Yeah, well, it's to help
Susan.
Really. He was going to bribe the guard to get
Susan,
to get Susan free, because he didn't think you could get Ian free of the charge of attempted murder. And then
I did like that little one line where they're talking to the guard and Ian just sneaks up behind him and chops him. It's like, make his decision for him already,
Yeah, that was, somebody had to make his decision for him as he was waffling.
Right. And so Ian puts on the garb in order to sneak up to the place of there's going to be another sacrifice for the eclipse. So there's an eclipse coming, and they get to the top of the pyramid, the place of sacrifice. Tlatoxel is there. He's blinded by rage and tries to kill Barbara. Ian stops him. Ixta and Ian get into this great fight. And Ian kills him by the Captain Kirk method of the rolling flip over off the side of the pyramid, where Ixta is crushed to the ground far below.
It's really effective. I mean, This is a very dramatic fight, and just like we saw the guy leap off of the pyramid to commit self-sacrifice earlier, we get to see Ixta, flipped off the pyramid here, and it's another really dramatic moment.
Mm-hmm. And while all this is going on, the doctor and Barbara and Susan are trying to get the door open, and they all escape through it. And in the end, the door, the tomb door closes. They're going on the TARDIS. Tlatoxel is left there with the victim, and he performs the sacrifice.
Yeah, they cut away right before we see it, but the knife is like ready to fall when they cut, so we know that guy died. And
it's again on a children's show, human sacrifice.
But
suicide and justifiable homicide.
Right.
It's followed up though with that great scene. So Kamika had given the doctor that little token.
Yeah.
And he had it in his pocket, and he took it out, he put it next to the body in the tomb, took a couple of steps away, he almost went into the TARDIS, turned around, grabbed it, put it back in his pocket, and went in.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Which is awesome. And so that'll in my story, River is going to turn to the doctor and say, "Oh, I remember when I gave you that," and that'll be the moment of revelation.
And he also consoles Barbara. Barbara right now is in sort of despairing. Like, what's the point of traveling through time and space if you can't change anything?
And the doctor acknowledges we failed, but then he goes on to say you couldn't change the whole civilization, but you did change one man. Even though Atlok lost his faith in human sacrifice, he found a better faith.
Right. Exactly. And then as the episode ends, we're setting up for our next episode, where the doctor says, even though the controls tell him the TARDIS is stationary, some of the controls say they're stationary, others indicate that it's still moving. And Ian speculates that they've landed on something that's moving. So that'll get us to the next episode.
And that's given the alternation of sci-fi and historical, the next is a sci-fi called The Sensorites.
Right. So again, I like
where Susan develops telepathic powers, showing us Time Lord telepathy for the first time.
Ooh. Interesting. So for me, I like this episode. It was interesting change of pace. Like in modern New Who, if they travel to Aztec times, you'd still have sci-fi elements. I mean, they just would incorporate some kind of alien or something like that.
You'd have ice warriors showing up or something.
Right. Or a ship named after Tlatoxel or something that he doesn't know about. But So I like this. I like the complexity of the plot, and I like the pacing. Again, maybe 4 episodes is a better pacing than 6, or later on in War Games, what was it, 10? I felt like the story moved along a lot better than in others. And I liked the character development. I liked Ian in this. I liked Barbara. I mean, as companions, I really like Ian and Barbara. I really feel like Susan still feels a little like the shrill teenager a lot, but
that's how they write her. It's unfortunate. Yeah. Like in the next episode, it's kind of Susan centric, the Sensorites. So she gets a chance to shine there. Barbara gets to shine here. And this is actually Jacqueline Hill, the actress who played Barbara. This is her favorite story for obvious reasons.
Right. So I like it. You know, how do you guys feel overall? Your thoughts or anything else you want to say about this episode?
Father Cory, you want to go first?
No, I was, you know, of course, again, setting aside that it was a 1960s TV show, so it had all the issues with that. It really was striking kind of how advanced of a storyline it really was. Yeah. I mean, there were still a few of the, you know, I've made the comment before, you watch some of these early episodes especially, and you get these are stage actors who are now, or stage or radio actors who are now having to figure out this medium called TV.
Yeah.
Because we're still early enough in television where that is a reality. This is an episode that it felt like it's really getting away from that. There was a lot less dramatic, exposition, and a lot more just showing it. You know, using the medium of what TV can do. Yeah, the fight was still a little fakey, where you had the guy swatting at the camera, and then the other guy, like 2 seconds later, lifting up his guard. But still, you know, there was still much more of this is telling the story as a TV show will tell the story.
Right.
You know.
I thought it's very engaging, and I really like this story. Like I really like Marco Polo. They're both really good just as stories. But I agree that they're beginning to figure out how to use TV a little bit better, and there's more showing. But there's still the acting to me seemed quite theatrical.
Oh, sure.
Especially the actor who plays Tlotoxl. I mean, he is really a scenery-chewing villain who is just slinking around. Just from his body posture, it tells you he's evil.
I mean, like when he looks right at the camera, you're a false god, and I will expose you,
destroy you. Yeah, and I know we get lit. I was going to mention that.
I didn't say it was perfect, but
well, no. But we get asides. You know, where the actor turns and talks to the audience and says things that the other characters are not meant to hear. And it's just like in a Shakespeare play where you have asides. And so we have Tlotoxl turning to the camera as the cliffhanger for episode 1 and saying she is a false goddess and I will destroy her or whatever. And that's our out for the first episode. Also, it struck me kind of related to that the cliffhangers in this series are kind of subdued. Instead of taking us right up to the moment where the doctor or one of his companions is in danger, they're confident in just kind of getting us into the proximity of danger, like Tlotoxl saying, "I'm going to destroy her." Barbara is not at that moment in danger. We're just being informed of a danger. And it's kind of more subdued than cliffhangers will be in the future. One logic problem that I noted with this is, so if the old high priest was a god, why isn't Otlok considered a god? And Dom, your theory of ancestor deification could explain that.
Yeah.
But there's still this weird thing where at one point, Tlotoxl tries to poison Barbara as a way of testing her to see if she's mortal or not. And so, well, okay, if she's mortal, then, then she's obvious. How does that disprove her deity? Because the previous high priest, who they regarded as a god, died. I guess ancestor deification is the only way to explain that he wasn't a god before, but he is now.
Well, they talk about the spirit of Yatoxel.
Yeah.
So that she is the personification of the spirit of Pataxel.
Right. So why should that make her immortal?
Yeah. Because and she says that yes, the spirit would continue, but I would die. The body would die.
Right.
Yeah.
So they kind of address that a little bit, but it's not they don't put a lot of thought into it either.
I do like how and I think they comment on this at one point, but I do like how comfortable the Aztecs are with the gender swapping deities.
Right.
They're more accepting than we are of gender swapping Time Lords.
Exactly.
Overall, though, I did really like this story, and I wanted to comment in particular the impressive sets that they have. They have, and it's obviously it's just a painting. Yeah. But they make an effort at here's this Aztec city that we can see from the top of the pyramid.
Right.
And so I like the impressive sets. Even the rotating door is an interesting thing. I also really like the costumes and the makeup. So like if you haven't seen it, Tlatoxel, the high priest of sacrifice, he's got, in addition to this elaborate wig and headdress and all this stuff, he's got like a band of black around the bottom of his face that sets off his mouth. But it's not like around his mouth. It's a band that goes from ear to ear. And it's really effectively creepy. Yep. Also, the costumes are really nice. Ian's costume, when he first puts on his Aztec warrior suit, it's this. He's got this elaborate kind of bird-oriented costume. Later, Ixta wears a jaguar costume where he's got this jaguar head, and that's like right out of manuscripts that we have in illustrations from Aztec culture. We know they wore costumes like this, and they've really made an effort to do that on this show, which is significant because this isn't an established historical period in British drama. They can't just go get the Elizabethan costumes out of the cupboard and use them. They had to make these things, and they've really gone to a lot of effort to do that. And I think it makes the series very visually interesting and fun to watch.
One thing to note is that Susan doesn't show up a lot in this. I mean, she's, like we said, she's sent off to a seminary. One of the reasons for that is that, like in Keys of Marinus, William Hartnell was on vacation for parts of that. Carol Ann Ford was on vacation for parts of this as well.
But to keep her in the show rather than just writing her off completely for those episodes, what they did is during the previous serial, they filmed some inserts of her in the seminary that they could drop into episodes 2 and 3 here.
Right. Exactly. So, and then just a production thing. They if you've ever seen we talked about the Adventures in Time and Space documentary, dramatic documentary about the beginning of Doctor Who, how they were forced to start producing the show at the Lime Grove Studios, which was a really bad place. Well, this was the Warriors of Death was the first episode of Doctor Who recorded at BBC Television Centre, because Verity Lambert, the producer, fought for it. And although it was only for one episode, and then they had to go back to Lime Grove after that. So just some interesting little behind the scenes bits. So I think that's about it. I was going to comment. I liked what they did with this, given the constraints of the time. I like what they did with the sets. If they had today's budget and today's technology, and the same story, I think it would be amazing. It would be a great episode of Doctor Who on today's show. So I think, given the constraints of time, looking back from what we have now, it's a lot of fun. So I think that's it. What did you think of this first Doctor story of the Aztecs? Let us know by visiting us at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, and leave us some feedback. Send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com. You can send us an audio file. We'd love to play that on the podcast. You can find links to all our personal social media and websites on our show notes on sqpn.com, including a link to BritBox.com, which is a way to watch some of these classic Doctor Who episodes. The ones that are all available are on BritBox, which is a pay streaming service. We don't have any kickback from them. Although we take some if they offered it.
We should get one.
We should get it. Yeah, they should offer an affiliate. It's like $6 a month if you want to do it. And if you do it for 1 month, you can watch as much Doctor Who for $6. But anyway, we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the 10th Doctor, the David Tennant story, Love and Monsters.
Considered one of the worst of the run.
This is up with the Slovene.
only disclaimer about that one is at least the good thing is it's got music from ELO, which is a band I personally like. That's about the only thing. So we're gonna have fun in this next episode. Let's put it that way,
folks. Reviews of bad movies, bad restaurants, bad TV shows are the most fun. So we're gonna pay the price for you because it's gonna be a lot of fun.
So you don't have to.
So until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Dom.
Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Well, thank you.
And once again, I'm Don Bettinelli. Thank you for listening. And remember, be careful who you offer a drink of chocolate to. You may end up married.
When will I see you again?
Soon, I expect. Or later. One of those.